They said the Alpha's command could bend any will, but he chose the one woman who could not speak. But when darkness came for them, she needed only one word to command the dead. The Hall of Stone was built to echo. Every command spoken here carried like thunder, bouncing from pillar to pillar until even the most reluctant ear was forced to hear. Torches hissed in their sconces, smoke curling toward a ceiling carved with the runes of old victories. The storm outside pressed against the walls, its rain like drumbeats, its lightning the flare of unseen claws. It was here the Alpha chose his mate. And tonight, every eye watched Eirene. He sat upon the high seat draped in wolfskin, his shoulders broad beneath the dark mantle of the first Alpha's pelt. His scarred throat was bare, a mark of defiance. His voice, when used, carried sharper than any blade. Below him, in a line before the dais, stood the women the elders had presented. Each carried her family's pride like a badge. They shifted nervously, whispering boasts of their lineage, the promise of strong bloodlines, the power of alliances. All except one, Eirene. She stood apart, a step back as though distance shielded her from the scrutiny of the hall. A girl wrapped in pale ash gray, hair falling loose around her shoulders, eyes the color of winter-lit rivers. Her silence was not new. Every soul in this hall knew she had never spoken a word. And every soul knew what that meant, unfit to stand beside the Alpha. Pack whispers hissed like wind through reeds. She cannot pledge. She cannot counsel. What good is a mute for a mate? But Eirene heard only silence. His amber gaze slid down the line of trembling shoulders and darting eyes until it rested on her. And it stayed. The weight of that stare pressed the room into quiet. He leaned forward on the high seat, scar pulling against his throat as he spoke. You. Gasps rose like a struck chord. The sound rushed through the chamber, colliding with disbelief. Several women looked at one another, confusion flickering across their painted faces. And then one moved. A tall, golden-haired daughter of the noble clans stepped forward quickly, skirts swishing as she lowered herself into a practiced bow. Her voice carried sharp with eagerness. My Alpha, I would give you sons with the strength of 10 wolves, my father's lands. Eirene's eyes, still fixed on Eirene, did not shift. His jaw tightened, and his voice rolled like distant thunder. Stand back, you were not called. The girl froze, paling under the sudden weight of his words. Shame and humiliation rippled through her shoulders as she stepped back into line, though not before casting a daggered glance at Eirene. The hall murmured louder now, disbelief curdling into outrage. Irene's chest tightened, her hands curling into her gown. She had not expected her name. No, not even her name, only a single word, you, to be aimed at her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The high priest shuffled forward, voice brittle with disapproval. Alpha, forgive me. The girl cannot speak. She has no voice to declare loyalty, no tongue to call you mate. It would be unwise. She has eyes, Eirene said, the edge in his tone silencing the priest as surely as a blade to the throat. She has hands. She has silence, and silence is worth more than empty promises. The hall went rigid. Some muttered protests, others smirked, enjoying the scandal. But no one dared laugh, not when the Alpha's voice had cut men in half with nothing more than a single order. Irene's breath caught. She had thought herself invisible here, an afterthought at best. Now she felt the full brunt of the pack's stares pressing into her skin. Her gaze flicked up, hesitant, almost unwilling, and found his. Eirene's eyes burned gold in the torchlight, unwavering. He descended from the high seat, his presence filling the steps with storm-heavy gravity. When he stood before her, the hall seemed to shrink around them. For a moment he only studied her, his head tilting slightly as if weighing a memory against the woman before him. Then, his voice dropped low, just for her. Eirene, he said, his scar tugging faintly as he shaped the word. "Will you stand as my mate?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Surprise stole through her chest like lightning, sharp and bright. She had never imagined this moment, never thought herself worthy of it, never believed anyone would want her silence beside them. Her throat ached as if 1,000 unsaid words pressed against it. And yet she said nothing. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her chin and gave a single nod. A murmur rippled through the chamber, some in disbelief, others in shock, but none louder than Ryden's quiet exhale, the sound of a man whose choice had found its answer. He reached for her hand. Her fingers trembled as his calloused palm closed around hers. Rough strength against fragile quiet. He did not crush, did not yank, but held steady, anchoring her as though she might drift away if he let go. "She is mine," he said, his voice carrying to every ear, even those pressed against the doors beyond. "And none of you will question me again." The pack bowed, some in submission, some in resentment, others in disbelief. The whispers would not die here, but for now, no one dared defy him. When the ceremony ended, Ryden kept her hand in his as he led her out of the hall. Behind them, the storm rattled the roof. Ahead of them, the doors yawned open, spilling wind and rain across the threshold. The pack watched as their alpha walked into the tempest with a silent bride at his side. Eirene's mind raced, still stunned, still burning with the weight of what had just been spoken. She glanced at Ryden, his profile sharp in the torchlight, his grip firm but not cruel. He did not look at her yet, but she felt the command in every step. And in her silence she wondered, had he truly chosen her? Or had fate chosen long before either of them understood? The wind met them first, shoving through the great doors and dragging a hiss of torch smoke into the rain. Ryden did not release Eirene's hand as they crossed the threshold. Stone steps fell away beneath them, slick with the storm. The courtyard lay open and listening, banners thrashing against their poles, the wolf-head standards snarling at the sky. Faces tipped up from the shadows of cloaks and hoods, warriors, stewards, stable boys, old aunties with their baskets clutched to their ribs. They stared the way people stare at omens. The alpha with a silent bride. Some made the sign against ill fortune. Some did not move at all. Ryden's stride never faltered. His cloak took the rein and flung it behind them. His heat bled through his glove into her colder fingers. Eirene matched his step, though her heartbeat rapped at her ribs in a pattern she had never known before. Fear and something stranger braided tight. He led her beneath the cloister arcade, where water fell in chains from the eaves and gathered in dark tongues along the flagstones. Lanterns burned there, a softer light than the halls, swaying with each gust. The air smelled of wet leather, iron, pine sap, and the faint sweet bite of crushed rosemary underfoot. A man waited at the turn, square-shouldered, rain beating and running off a cropped head. He wore a wolf-bone clasp at his collar, the mark of the captain of the guard. His gaze flicked to Eirene, then back to his alpha. "Cale," Ryden said. "Alpha." Cale's voice had grit in it, like stone dragged over stone. He inclined his head to Eirene with the stiff respect a soldier gives a banner, not a woman. "The council convenes at daybell. There is talk." "There always is," Ryden said, and moved on. Cale fell in behind them. Eirene's breath fogged in the cooler air. The lanterns gathered their light in Ryden's hair, made the scar at his throat a pale slash. She watched the way he carried himself, command as a posture, a way of setting one's weight so nothing could push you off center. When he lengthened his stride to avoid a pooling stream, he tugged gently at her hand without looking back, an instinct to keep her feet dry that he probably did not know he had. The smallness of the kindness pressed oddly against her chest. They turned into a passage hung with old shields, the metal dulled to a thoughtful gray. Servants scurried, froze, bowed, vanished. At a side arch, a pair of wolfhounds paced and whined, their paws clicking restless patterns. One lifted its head as they neared, nose twitching, then trotted straight to Eirene and pressed its wet muzzle to her free wrist. Its eyes were amber speckled with green, curious and unafraid. Eirene paused. The animal's breath warmed her skin. Its heartbeat rang against the bone of its skull. She set her palm between its ears, a measured stroke, smoothing damp fur the wrong way and then right. The dog sighed, as if a knot in the world had loosened. It sat, leaned, stayed. Ryden noticed. His eyes moved, one quick cut of gold, and held. Something in his jaw eased before he resumed walking. He did not pull her from the animal. He waited. When she lifted her hand, the dog stayed seated, ears tipped forward, as if assigned to remember the feel of her touch. Up a narrow stair, down another corridor that smelled of starch and smoke, into a chamber whose door stood open like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. A hearth burned low to the right. Heavy curtains gripped the wind trying to sneak through the shutters. The room held simple things: a long table, a wash basin, a wolf pelt thrown across a bench. Nothing gilded, nothing grand. This was a warrior's space. Ryden let go of her hand only to shrug off his cloak and hang it from an iron hook, water pattering to the rushes at his boots. Then he turned fully to her. Without the hall and its eyes, without the obligation of ceremony, his presence collapsed nearer. The storm became background, a steady breath through the old stones. "Eirene," he said, her name warmed by the firelight. He lifted his hands a fraction, palms up, sign not of surrender, but of offering. "I will not have you lost in my house. There are rooms that will be yours, people who will answer you. But first—" He stopped. The line of his brow pinched, not with anger, but with the pause of a man choosing his next step like a sure-footed climber on wet rock. "We need a way to speak." Her throat tightened at the word, even when his tone held no demand. Habit made her palm rise to the small pendant at her neck, a piece of pale bone carved with a ring of runes. Her thumb found the shallow grooves the way a river finds the old path to sea. The charm felt cool, as it always did, as if it had drank and kept the hush that lived in her. Ryden's gaze flicked to the pendant, then back to her eyes. He had noticed it before. She knew. But this was the first time he weighed it with curiosity rather than indifference. He did not ask. Not yet. Slowly, he stepped closer and offered his hand again, not to hold, but as a surface. He turned it up, fingers loose, palm open, the calluses like old roads, the lifeline a pale river. "Show me," he said, "if you will." She looked at his mouth when he spoke, at the shape of the words, then at the patience arranged behind his eyes. The hall had been a place of commands. This small room, somehow, was a place of permissions. Eirene lifted her right hand and with one finger drew a simple line on his palm. The long stroke for I, then a cross stroke, then a curve. He watched as if a scout learning the bends of a new country. She traced, I, pause, here, pause, you. Ryden's mouth slanted, not quite a smile. He nodded once. Good. He turned his hand, knuckles up now, and with a knuckle of his other hand, he drew back on the same skin. I see you. Heat feathered through her chest. This, too, was a language, one that lived in the spaces words usually filled. She nodded, slow. A knock came like a pebble thrown against a shield. Kale again, without waiting to be bidden, but not rude, merely used to urgency. Alpha, the elders have gathered early. Of course they have, Ryden said. The softness sheened from his voice like oil skimmed from water. Command slid back in with the weight of a mantle. He looked to Eirene. You do not have to attend. She let the thought cross her face. But I am your mate now. It surprised her, the possessive that echoed back. She set her hand against her sternum, then lifted it toward the door in an open arc. With. Ryden's eyes held hers a heartbeat longer, as if he were listening to words she had not produced. With, he agreed. They went together. The council chamber smelled of wet wool and old arguments. A round table sat like a millstone in its center, polished by time and elbows. On the far wall, a map had been stitched into leather with threads the color of rivers and roads. Men and women occupied carved chairs with the familiarity of bodies that had worn grooves into wood over years of debate. The high priest stood at the window, where the shutters had been cracked to let the rain's voice in. His hood hung back, a crown of gray hair curling damply around a skull sharpened by piety. The elders were arrayed like chessmen, the noble daughter among them, golden hair coiled and pinned, mouth thinned to a slash. A few warriors leaned near the door, hawk-eyed and silent. "Alpha," the high priest said, his bow respectful and rigid. "We did not expect—" "My mate stands beside me," Ryden said, light as a knife that had found its sheath. Silence crept heavy along the floorboards. "Forgive blunt words," said Elder Maros, who never had. "But we speak of the pack's safety and its future. There are forms, vows, a mate must pledge." Eirene felt the room angle toward her like a slope taking rain. The word pledge threaded needles through the back of her throat. Her fingers found the pendant again. The bone had no warmth to give. Ryden did not look at her. He looked at the elders. "You have my vow," he said. "Her vow will be shown in its way, not yours." "And what way is that?" snarled a younger elder, spit-bright and impatient. "She has no voice. We cannot weigh promises we cannot hear." Eirene's skin prickled. Ryden's hand flexed once at his side, a tiny movement like a wolf deciding not to lunge. When he spoke, he did not raise his voice. "You have weighed many promises you thought you heard and found them hollow," he said. "You will not measure hers with the same broken scale." The golden-haired lady did not stand. She unfurled. "Is the Alpha's bed a place for charity?" she asked, sweet poison steeping each syllable. "Or shall we call it what it is, folly?" A line of heat lit under Eirene's breastbone. Not shame. No, not that. Something older. The storm outside drew breath. The wick flames leaned toward her as if a draft had opened only where she stood. Ryden's head turned a fraction, amber focusing, narrowing. He heard the change in the room, the way a hunter hears the step of a deer in new snow. His gaze slid, brief, precise, to the pendant at Eirene's throat, then to her eyes. She steadied her breath. The pendant's edges pressed crescents into her skin. "Not now," she told the old power sleeping under the hush. "Not for this." She stepped forward. A thin sound moved through the chamber, the sudden, gentle shift of weight on old wood. She did not speak. She did not bow. She set her palm flat on the table and pressed, a deliberate, quiet claim. The bone ring warmed then, just a degree, as if granting strength and taking something in exchange. With the forefinger of her other hand, she traced on the polished wood where all the elders could see, "I stand with an hymn." The room did not know what to do with that. Contempt does not have good footing when faced with simplicity. It scrabbled, slid. Ryden's hands had not moved, but his presence shifted like a mountain removing itself between wind and tree. "You have your answer," he said. "We have a worry," the high priest countered, softer. He looked not at Eirene, but toward the map, toward borders and places where night gathered. Ravens from the north brought news 3 days past. The Breachwood stirs. Hunters have gone missing. There are tracks with no bodies to print them. A murmur like fabric torn in careful strips. Ryden's head tipped. And, the priest said, there are whispers of old things walking with new shapes. Spirits called into flesh, then left unmoored. His gaze slid to Eirene then, quick and ashamed of itself. "It is an unlucky season for—" Experiments. The word struck like a pebble flung at a wolf. The warriors by the door inhaled with the same annoyed breath. Cale's jaw swung a degree tighter. Ryden did not bare teeth. He bared patience. "You will not use that word for my mate." "We use the words the world gives us," Elder Maros insisted. "And the world will give worse. The packs to the east will watch. They will come for weakness." "Then we will show them none," Ryden said. He turned then, not to the elders, not to the priest, but to Eirene. He held out his palm as he had in the quiet room, and did not care that a dozen eyes watched him do so. She placed her fingers there. He drew. "I trust you." Her breath unspooled. She traced back, pulse steadying as if this small movement, this exchange of heat on skin, were a ritual older than the hall, older than the storm. "I stand with you." Something eased in the chamber's old bones. Not acceptance? Not yet. But the kind of pause a wild thing gives when it rethinks the chosen direction of run. The high priest bowed from the spine. "Very well," he said, not happily. "The right of presentation at moonrise. The pack must see what we have seen." His eyes snagged on Eirene's pendant before he turned away. Ryden nodded. At moonrise. They left the council before the elders broke into their usual smaller poisons. The corridor outside held fewer eyes. Wind hunted along the ceiling beams. Water ticked somewhere unseen. Eirene's feet felt the daybell in the stone as it sang low and far. Ryden walked beside her rather than one pace ahead. The small correction lodged in her like a warm coal. When they reached a narrow stair that corkscrewed toward the ramparts, he gestured, "May I?" and, when she inclined her head, guided her upward. They emerged into wind. The battlements shouldered the storm. Beyond them, the world lay in bruised colors. Forest smudged with mist, river a dull steel thread, the Breachwood a blacker seam at the horizon than any other wood dared. Lightning stitched a far hill to the sky and left the smell of iron and rain in their mouths. "Here," he said, voice lower against the wind. "This is what you have married." The line of his hand cut the land into understandables. South, our farms. West, the old stone road. North, our wolves run to the border. East, his mouth thinned, almost a smile with its humor pulled out. The breach. She watched where he pointed and then watched him. The rain slicked his hair to his temples and carved a clear dark line down the scar at his throat. He turned and found her gaze set on him, not the land, and for a beat he looked startled, like a man realizing he had been seen where he had thought himself invisible. Wind pressed her cloak against her legs. She set her hand on the cold crenel stone, then lifted it to write the question on his palm. "Why? Me?" He looked at the word as if it had teeth. He did not answer quickly. Then, as if trusting the truth more than craft, he said, "Because when I look at you, the noise in my head stops." A gull cried raggedly over the river. The rain forgot itself for 3 breaths, lightening to mist. Eirene's heartbeat stumbled and found a new rhythm. Surprised, still surprised, that she had been chosen, and more surprised by this answer than any public reason he could have put in the council ledger. She wrote, slower now, each letter a small decision. "I do not fear you." He huffed without humor, then with it. "No," he said, the word almost tender with relief. "You do not." She lifted her hand and hesitated. The pendant lay like a small pale moon at her throat. Some days it seemed a shield, some days a chain. The runes along its edge were worn by the pads of her fingers. She set her palm over it now and pressed, and the wind seemed to hush 1 degree, like a choir catching its breath. Ryden's eyes followed the movement and knew to look away from it too, the way a hunter knows not to stare directly at the thing that makes the deer lift its head. He did not ask his question yet. He would. But not here, not with the Breachwood looking on. Below them, a bell rang another note into the gray. The courtyard answered. A woman's laughter rolled out and died when someone hushed it. A wolfhound barked once, the one who had leaned into Irene's hand. "At moonrise," he said, a reminder of the rite, "they will want spectacle. I will give them only what is ours to give." She nodded. He turned to go, then stopped. "Signals," he said, "until we speak each other like this without thinking." He pointed to his throat, a small tilt, a question. "If you are unwell, if you want me near." She thought for a breath, then took his wrist and set his hand lightly over her shoulder, fingers resting where collarbone opened into neck. She turned her face until the line of her jaw brushed his knuckles. Heat moved where skin hovered near skin. "Here," her gesture said. "If I touch here twice, come." His fingers did not tighten. They were steady, respectful, almost reverent, as if he were holding the pause before a vow. "Twice," he said. She let go, and the wind stole the shape of the moment, but not its warmth. They descended the stair together. Behind them, beyond the wall, something walked at the edge of the Breachwood where no animal had left prints in a week. The rain sewed the earth shut after every step it took. The storm listened. The runes at Irene's throat slept with one eye open. At moonrise, the pack would have its spectacle, and Eirene would stand in silence beside the man whose voice could break a world, while the oldest voice in her waited for its hour. The storm thinned as evening fell, leaving behind a sky streaked with iron clouds and a swollen moon. Lanterns lined the courtyard, their flames restless in the wind, their glow pooling across damp stone. The entire pack had gathered, warriors in leathers, women with babes slung against their hips, graybeards leaning on carved staffs. Even the youngest had been roused, perched on walls or huddled at their mother's skirts. The rite of presentation had been kept for centuries. At moonrise, the alpha would show his mate, and the pack would measure her with their eyes, weighing strength against expectation. Some had come with curiosity, others with mockery tucked sharp behind their teeth. Eirene stood at the edge of the torchlight, cloak drawn close around her, heart hammering beneath. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the pressure of voices muttering low. She had been watched before, pitied, dismissed, but never like this. At her side, Ryden adjusted his stance, broad shoulders cutting the light, his presence anchoring her against the tide. His amber eyes swept the crowd, daring any to step forward in challenge. The scar at his throat caught moonlight, a pale reminder of how many battles his command had carried. The high priest raised a hand, rings glinting, and the murmur fell to hush. His voice carried, smooth and brittle. Before the eyes of the moon and the blood of the pack, the alpha names his mate. Let her step forward. Let her vow be witnessed. A ripple went through the crowd. Expectation, disbelief. Irene's breath caught. She felt Ryden's gaze shift to her, not commanding, but waiting. A question, asked in silence. She remembered his hand earlier, the word traced into her palm. "I trust you." Her fingers tightened on the edge of her cloak. She stepped forward. Gasps trembled from the crowd, quickly stifled. The golden-haired woman, still raw with humiliation from before, let her laughter slip this time, a brittle, cutting sound. "She cannot even speak." Eirene faltered, the world tilting sharp around her. But then, a brush against her shoulder, Ryden's presence, steady, unshaken. She lifted her hand. Slowly, deliberately, she unclasped the pendant at her throat. The runes glowed faintly as the bone disk caught the firelight, like moon carved into ivory. She did not remove it from its chain, but let it rest in her open palm, a quiet declaration. "My silence is my vow." Then, with her other hand, she touched her sternum, her heartbeat, and extended outward toward the gathered pack. "I stand with him." Whispers rose, tangled. Some scoffed, others murmured uneasily. But the image, the woman who would not speak, offering her silence as vow, burned itself into their eyes. Ryden's voice broke the murmur, sharp and certain. "You see her vow," he said, the storm's weight returning to his tone. "You will learn its strength, as I have." The crowd bent under his voice, some bowing heads, others gritting teeth. The rite was done. But the night was not finished. From beyond the walls came a sound, low, dragging, wrong, like branches snapping without wind. Wolves near the gate began to growl, hackles stiffening. A scout stumbled into the courtyard, mud spattered to his knees, his breath a knife in his chest. "Alpha," he dropped to one knee. "The Breachwood, they're here." The pack rippled in panic, women clutching children, warriors reaching for blades. Ryden strode forward, cloak flaring, his voice cutting through the noise. "Form lines, shield the weak." His command rang like hammered steel, sending order surging through chaos. Warriors moved, children swept back, shields raised. But Eirene, she felt something else. The wrongness outside the gates pressed against her chest, an air too heavy to breathe. Her hand went to the pendant instinctively, fingers clenching. Beneath the bone disk, warmth stirred, not the comforting warmth of flesh, but something deeper, the old power she had locked away. The gates shuddered. Wood groaned, iron bolts whining. Shadows moved beyond the torchlight, too many, too tall, limbs bending where they should not. The pack braced. Then the first figure broke through, a shape not wholly beast, not wholly man, eyes pale and empty. A spirit lashed into flesh, staggering forward with claws tearing. Behind it, others lurched, hollow-mouthed and hungry. Cries split the air. Blades flashed. Eirene froze, her heart seizing. She had seen spirits before, in dreams and reflections, but never clothed in flesh. Never this close. Her breath rattled, and the pendant grew hot against her skin. Ryden's voice bellowed, driving his warriors into the breach. Steel rang, wolves snarled, arrows hissed into the night. But the creatures did not fall easily. Wounds closed where they should not. Flesh burned without smoke. And then one broke free, surging past the warriors, slamming into the courtyard with speed unnatural. It came straight for her. Irene's body locked. She lifted her hands, useless, empty, her voice strangled in her throat. But Ryden was already moving. His blade arced, biting deep, throwing the creature back. His stance towered before her, a wall of iron and storm. Yet she felt the pull. The air thickened. The thing was not gone. It rose again, snarling, eyeless sockets fixed on her. Something inside her broke. The pendant at her throat flared with light. Heat burned into her palm, where she still held it loose. And then, without meaning, without choice, she spoke. One word. "Yield!" It tore from her throat like a bell tolling, after years of silence, low and resonant, vibrating bone and stone. The spirit froze, its body convulsed, hands clawing at its own chest. A sound like wind screaming through a dead forest ripped from its mouth before it collapsed into ash. The courtyard fell silent. All eyes turned to her, to Eirene. Her chest heaved. Her throat ached as though torn raw. But her voice, the voice she had buried for so long, still hummed against her lips. And Ryden. He stared, not with fear, but with something fiercer. Recognition. Because in that sound, in that word, he remembered. The boy by the stream, the girl with silent hands, and the way silence had once felt heavier than any command. Now he knew. The mate he had chosen was not silent at all. She was the voice that called the spirits. The courtyard had not yet caught its breath when the gates split wide. Iron shrieked as hinges tore, and through the broken maw came the horde. Spirits clothed in stolen flesh, faces twisted, mouths open in voiceless hunger. Torches guttered in their wake. The pack shouted, scrambled. Wolves leapt from the lines, teeth meeting bone, only to find the bodies did not bleed as they should. Arrows thudded, spears struck, swords cleaved, and still the creatures came. Eirene stood frozen, her hand burning around the pendant that glared white-hot in her palm. She had spoken one word, and the courtyard had changed. Her voice echoed in her bones, still, alien and raw. Raiden's hand closed around her wrist, steadying her. His eyes, fierce and molten, found hers. "Stay with me." Then he was gone, blade flashing, cloak a dark wing in the firelight. His roar split the air, his command pulling warriors back into order. "Shields, hold the line! Wolves, to me!" They obeyed, because his voice left no room for refusal. Yet even his thunder could not halt the tide. The first spirit she had banished still smoked where it had fallen. Ash scattered across the stones. Others were coming faster, more furious, as if the loss of one had roused the rest. Eirene's breath sawed in her chest. The bone disk flared in her palm, pulsing like a heart. The heat seared but did not burn her fingers. The world seemed to shift. The wind stilled. She could hear them. The spirits, like voices behind walls, whispers pressed against glass. They called for release, for command, for her. Another beast lunged. A wolf intercepted, snarling, but claws raked its flank. The warrior beside it cried out. Eirene's throat ached with words she had never dared shape. Her lips trembled. She spoke. "Bind." The word struck like a chain snapping taut. The spirit reeled, convulsing, then dropped to its knees. Its body shuddered, limbs twitching against an invisible tether. The wolf tore its throat, and this time the creature did not rise. Gasps rose around her. Packmates stared, half in awe, half in fear. She had no time to fear them back. Another broke through, and another. "Yield!" she cried, her voice cracking like iron struck on stone. The nearest spirit froze, smoke pouring from its mouth as it crumbled into ash. Her voice tore at her throat, raw, jagged, but alive. For every word, the pendant in her hand flared brighter, runes blazing like molten brands. The pack fought harder, hope mixing with terror. Yet some turned their eyes on her, whispers carrying even in the clash. She commands them. Is she with us, or them? Which? The word cut sharper than the claws of any spirit. Her knees wobbled. She staggered, until a hand gripped her shoulder, anchoring. Raiden. Blood smeared his blade, his arm braced solidly around her. His voice roared across the chaos, silencing every tongue. "She is your Alpha's mate. Her voice is ours." The words thundered, leaving no room for doubt. He met her eyes, fierce and unyielding. "Do it. Don't hold back." Something in her broke free then, not fear, not silence, but the part of her that had been waiting all her life. She lifted the pendant high in her fist. The chain coiled against her wrist as the bone disk blazed white as a star. No longer her cage, it was only a relic in her grasp. Her voice rang. "Come!" The courtyard shook. From the shadows of the Breachwood, shapes rose, not twisted corpses, not half-formed horrors, but pale, translucent spirits drawn to her like moths to flame. They swirled above, whispering in voices no one else could hear. Their presence chilled the air, but they hovered, awaiting her command. Eirene's lips parted, her voice trembling but firm. "Protect." The spirits dove, pale fire wrapping the corrupted creatures. The twisted bodies shrieked, writhing, as the summoned spirits tore them free, dragging them back into the night, dissolving them to smoke. The pack watched in silence. Battle paused as the impossible unfolded. Wolves panted, blades dripped, children clutched their mothers tighter. But the tide had not ended. From the breach itself came one larger than the rest, a shadow clothed in muscle and bone, eyes pits of void. It ducked under the gate's ruins, towering above them all. Its growl rattled the teeth in their skulls. Raiden stepped before her, blade raised. "Stay back." But Eirene's hand pressed to his arm. She shook her head. Her silver eyes glowed with something fierce, unearthly. "This one is mine," her silence said. She stepped forward. The giant spirit beast lunged, claws raised. Her voice broke the night. "Yield!" The word cracked like a whip. The beast staggered but did not fall. Its chest heaved, its claws raking stone. Again, louder, stronger. "Yield!" This time the earth itself shook. The beast screamed, its body convulsing, black smoke pouring from its sockets. With one last bellow, it collapsed into dust, scattering into the wind. Silence reigned. Only the storm spoke, the last drops of rain hissing on stone. The courtyard was littered with ash, the stench of smoke and iron thick. Eirene swayed. Her voice had torn from her like pieces of her own soul. Her knees buckled. But Raiden was there, arms catching her before she fell. His hold was iron and gentle both. He lowered her to the stones, her head resting against his chest. His voice rumbled low, not command now, but something softer. "Easy, I have you." Her throat burned, raw as if scraped hollow, but when she tried to whisper, sound came, barely, but there. She shaped it carefully, one word only: "Stay." His grip tightened. His voice, the voice that bent armies, answered her quiet plea without hesitation. "Always." The pack pressed closer, not in mockery now, but in awe and fear tangled together. None dared speak against her, not after what they had seen. The high priest stepped forward at last, robes damp, face pale. His lips trembled as if struggling to form protest, but when Raiden's amber eyes cut to him, the words withered unspoken. Instead, he bowed. "Alpha, mate." The others followed, one by one, heads bent, knees lowered. Eirene, the silent bride, had spoken, and the world had listened. The storm had passed, but its voice lingered in the dripping eaves and sodden earth. Smoke from the torches curled upward, thin as prayers. The courtyard still bore the stains of battle, ash ground into cracks, claw marks scarring the gates, but dawn's first light touched everything with a weary kind of peace. Eirene sat on the steps of the hall, cloak wrapped around her shoulders. Her throat ached, raw and bruised from words she had never meant to speak. The pendant lay in her lap, the chain broken, the bone disc dulled to gray. Its runes no longer glowed. It was nothing more than carved relic now. Raiden stood a few paces away, conferring with Kale and the remaining captains. His voice carried as it always did, firm as stone, but when his gaze strayed to her, it softened. She felt it, his watching, like warmth in the cold. At last he dismissed the men and came to her. He crouched at her side, broad shoulders hunching to make himself smaller. His eyes searched her face. "How badly are you hurt?" She lifted her hand to her throat, fingers grazing the tender skin. No sound came, but her mouth shaped the truth. "I will mend." His jaw flexed, but he nodded. Then his gaze dropped to the pendant. He picked it up carefully, as though it might still burn him. "This held you silent. Why?" She hesitated. The words were not easy, even in the quiet of her own mind. Finally, she traced the answer on his palm. It was given, to guard. His thumb brushed her knuckles, waiting. She closed her eyes, remembering. The night fires of her childhood village. A woman's voice low and urgent. The press of cool bone against her neck as the clasp closed for the first time. Her mother's hands trembling. "This will keep you safe. Do not speak, my little one. Not until the world is ready, is..." Irene's breath caught as the memory sharpened. Her mother's face, shadowed but fierce. The fear in her eyes not for herself, but for her daughter. "Your voice is not like others. It calls what should not be called. Promise me you will be silent." Tears stung her lashes. She pressed her hand against Raiden's, steadying herself as she traced. "My mother. To hide me, To hide this. Ryden's eyes darkened, not with fear, but with understanding. He looked at the dull pendant, then back at her. She saved you from the world, he said quietly, or from what the world would have done if it had known. She nodded once, a tremor rippling her shoulders. He let out a slow breath. And the creatures tonight? You knew them. Her silver eyes lifted, haunted. She touched the stone at her feet, then spread her fingers wide. Spirits, bound to flesh, twisted, wrong. From the Breachwood, Ryden murmured, glancing toward the horizon where the trees stood like black teeth. I should have known. That place has never been silent. It leaks its poison when we grow careless. She traced again, slower this time. They answered me, because they always have. I was born to command them. His head tilted, studying her. Born to? Her lips parted, but her voice failed her again. She pressed her hand to her chest, then outward. Bloodline. My mother. Her mother before. He absorbed this in silence. A family of spirit callers, hunted into myth, thought gone. And yet one had survived. She had survived. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, iron wrapping something tender. Then the pendant did not make you who you are. It only kept you from being seen. Her gaze held his, silver to gold. A nod. Ryden's fist closed around the relic. He set it down on the step, then crushed it beneath his palm until the bone cracked and splintered. The sound was final. No more hiding. The words sank into her like heat, stronger than the sun creeping up the courtyard walls. She leaned into him, her temple resting against his shoulder. He did not move at first. Then, slowly, his arm curved around her, drawing her close. For a long moment they sat like that, the alpha who commanded with thunder and the woman who had ruled herself into silence. Around them, the pack moved cautiously, still shaken, but none dared intrude. At last, Ryden's voice brushed the top of her hair. The Breachwood is stirring. More will come, but they will find us ready. They will find you ready. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her heavy. Yet beneath the ache in her throat, beneath the fear, a small spark glowed. Not silence, not shame. A gift finally unchained. Her hand found his, fingers weaving between his calloused ones. And though her lips could not yet shape more, her silence spoke as it always had. I am not afraid. Ryden's grip tightened, his head bowing until his lips brushed her hair. His answer rumbled through her bones. Nor am I. Not with you beside me. The dawn broke fully then, spilling gold across stone and ash, catching in their joined hands. And for the first time in her life, Eirene did not feel the weight of silence. She felt only the strength of a voice the world had finally heard, and the alpha who had chosen her not in spite of it, but because of it. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.